Some places just seem to breathe evil. I've heard whispers of travelers who've returned from these spots different than they were before. In the backwoods of California, a woman reports something demonic has been tapping on her window and haunting her. One Australian adventurer swears that something horrific was circling their tent under the towering redwoods. Another camper near Sacramento rushed home after seeing a dark presence lurking just out of sight, its hollow eyes staring from the shadows. Welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and become part of our ever-growing community of the curious. Now prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear is not for the faint of heart. A rural Californian writes in with a tale of battling a terrifying demon that scratches at windows, mimics familiar voices, and stalks her inside her own home for weeks, leaving her forever changed and constantly on edge. This is her horrific encounter and terrifying story. I'm writing this in broad daylight because I can't bring myself to speak of it once night falls. My hands still shake whenever I remember the way it stood on my porch, the grin across its rotting face, and the horrible stench that signaled it was near. I live in a quiet part of rural California where most folks know each other by name. I used to feel safe here, no matter how dark it got outside. But these last few weeks, everything changed. There's a demon, or some evil creature, that decided to make me its nightly target, and I can't unsee the horrors it brought with it. I'm telling this story now in the hope that someone out there understands what I went through and maybe can learn how to protect themselves. This all started about 6 weeks ago, give or take a day. I had gone to bed early because I had work in the morning, and I remember waking up suddenly at 3:06 a.m. It felt like something had tapped my shoulder, but when I sat up, the room was empty. Then I heard this dragging noise from the other side of my bedroom wall. It sounded like claws scraping wood, slow and deliberate. My heart raced, but I forced myself to check it out. I flicked on the porch light and peered out the window. That's when I saw it for the first time. The creature was crouched down, arms too long for its body, with bony fingers ending in filthy claws. Its skin was this slimy pale gray, stretched tight over bones that seemed to poke in odd angles. Patches of hair clung to its scalp in clumps. But the worst part was the face, 2 pitch-black eyes, no whites at all, and a mouth that curled into a twisted grin, revealing rows of jagged teeth. When my light hit it, it hissed and scrambled backward into the shadows, disappearing faster than I thought something that size could move. I just stood there shaking, telling myself I must be dreaming. But deep down, I knew it was real. The next day, I spent hours searching my property. My dog, Hero, was acting strange, whimpering and refusing to go anywhere near the fence line. I found scratch marks on the walls outside my bedroom. Long, deep grooves that definitely weren't made by a raccoon or stray cat. When I tried to tell a neighbor, he gave me a funny look, said I might need to get more rest. I felt so alone, like no one believed me. Yet every night, around 3 a.m., the thing would return. By week 2, it escalated. I'd hear it pacing along my porch. Sometimes it would tap the windows with its claws. Other times it let out this low growl that sounded like a mix between a wheeze and a snarl. One time, I heard what sounded like a voice calling my name. I recognized the tone. It was my mother's voice. She's alive and well, living a few hours away, so I knew it wasn't her. But for a split second, it made my heart jump, thinking maybe she'd surprised me with a visit. Then the voice changed mid-sentence into this guttural hiss, and I realized the demon was mocking me, trying to lure me outside. I'd go days without proper sleep. At work, people noticed the bags under my eyes. They asked if everything was okay. I'd say I was having nightmares and leave it at that. What else could I say? Some sort of demon is stalking my house? They'd probably send me to a doctor. Meanwhile, the creature just kept coming back, night after night, trying new ways to get me to open the door. The smell would always arrive first, like rotten meat and sulfur, an awful odor that drifted through the cracks under the doors. Then I'd hear scraping or tapping, or sometimes it'd just scratch on the roof. I can't explain how terrifying it is to hear something with claws walking on your roof in the middle of the night. Around the third week, I started hearing it inside my house. I'd lock all the doors and windows, but sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of cabinets opening and shutting, or footsteps in the hallway. By the time I'd gather the courage to check, the place would be empty, but the stench remained. I found muddy, claw-like prints by the back door one morning, shaped almost like a human hand but elongated, with extra joints in each finger. That's when I realized it could pass through barriers, like walls or locked doors whenever it wanted. I couldn't keep it out. One night, I decided to set up my phone camera in the living room, hoping to catch a glimpse or at least gather evidence. Nothing showed up on the footage, except for odd static and flickers of shadow. The next morning, my phone battery was drained down to nothing, even though it was fully charged before I went to bed. It was like the creature's presence was interfering with electronics. I felt so powerless. By week 4, I was desperate. My aunt, who lives in another part of California, was the only one who halfway believed my story. She told me about old remedies, burning sage, spreading salt at doorways, that sort of thing. I figured it couldn't hurt. That night, I lined all my window sills with salt, traced a line of it across each threshold, and let sage smoke swirl through every room. The air felt lighter, at least for a few hours. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., I heard an ungodly scream right outside my bedroom window. It was so loud I expected the glass to shatter. I looked out to see it pressing its face to the window. Its skin was cracked, oozing a thick, dark fluid from the edges of its mouth and eyes, as though the salt had burned it somehow. It clawed at the window, leaving these horrible streaks of black goo behind. I yelled at it to go away. It just stared back with that twisted grin. Then it spat something that hissed and smoked on the glass. The smell was so foul I had to cover my nose to avoid gagging. Hero, my poor dog, barked like mad and tried to hide under the bed. I could see the demon's beady eyes flicking from me to the dog, like it was sizing up which of us it wanted first. I slammed the curtains shut, my heart racing, and spent the rest of the night chanting every prayer I could remember. But the scratching didn't stop until dawn. One particularly terrifying incident happened in the 5th week. I woke up to it standing right at the foot of my bed. Its head was cocked to the side, eyes locked on me. I screamed, and it made this eerie rattling sound like laughter. The stench was so powerful I nearly passed out. I managed to grab my phone and shine the flashlight at it. The creature recoiled, letting out a high-pitched shriek, then disappeared into the shadows of my room. I scrambled to turn on every light in the house, checking every corner. Nothing. But the sticky footprints left behind told me I hadn't imagined a thing. After that, I was determined to find a permanent solution. I talked more with my aunt, who reached out to a friend that supposedly had some experience with evil entities. They instructed me to get holy water from a local church, just a small vial, enough to sprinkle around the house. They also told me to do this at exactly 3 a.m. the next time it showed up, to face it rather than hide. I'd never been so afraid in my life, but I didn't see any other way. Running didn't help. Blocking windows didn't help. So, on a Friday night, I prepared. I had salt, sage, and the holy water. I left all the lights off, waiting in the dark until that scratching returned. When it did, my heart pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. Still, I forced myself to open the front door. Sure enough, it was on my porch, hunched over, drooling dark slime onto the wooden boards. The rotten stench nearly stopped me from breathing. My dog whined behind me. I stepped out, holding my flashlight in one hand and the vial of holy water in the other. The creature rose up on its hind legs, towering over me, so thin it looked impossible for it to stand without snapping in half. Its eyes flickered with a hint of red among the blackness. I threw salt at it. It roared, the sound shaking the porch rails. Then I splashed the holy water at its chest. Steam or smoke rose from where the drops landed, and it unleashed an ear-splitting scream. I felt dizzy from the noise, but I kept going, tossing more water, shouting that it wasn't welcome, calling on any higher power I could think of. The demon lunged, claws slicing through the air. One claw caught my shoulder, ripping through my shirt and leaving a burning pain that spread instantly. I nearly dropped the vial, but I clutched it tighter. Somehow, I managed to splash more water right into its face. The creature stumbled backward, screeching. Its twisted grin turned into a snarl, and for a second, I thought it was going to slash me to bits. But it kept sizzling where the water touched it, chunks of its slimy flesh peeling away. It staggered off the porch and vanished into the darkness, leaving a trail of foul-smelling goo. After it disappeared, I collapsed, sobbing in pain and relief. My shoulder burned like fire, but I made it back inside. I slammed the door, poured the last of the holy water across the threshold, and fell to the floor, shaking all over. That was the first night it didn't come back at 4 a.m. or any time after. For the next week, I waited. Each night, I sat up, half expecting to hear those claws tapping on the glass. But the house stayed quiet. The stench faded. The scratch marks on the walls remained, as did the scars on my shoulder. I keep them covered because I don't want to explain how they got there. People ask if I had an accident with farm equipment, and I just nod and let them believe that. I still don't sleep easily. Any small noise at night makes me flinch. But so far, the demon hasn't returned. My aunt thinks I drove it away for good, or maybe it's just waiting. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that it hasn't scratched on my windows or banged on my doors since that night I faced it down with holy water and salt. If a creature tries to get in your home at 3 a.m., if it mimics voices you know, if it leaves claw marks and smells like decay, believe your instincts. Don't let anybody tell you it's just your imagination. Next up is a story of an Australian traveler's journey into a nightmarish race against unknown entities lurking deep in the woods. Eerie sightings, cryptic warnings, and a sinister presence hidden in forbidden areas of the forest leave them questioning what truly dwells in the darkness. My name is Aaron, and I'm an Australian backpacker who thought Redwood National Park in Northern California would be just another stop on my list. It wasn't. The place changed something inside of me, and I don't think I can ever forget what I experienced there. I feel like I need to tell someone, anyone. I arrived at Redwood National Park about 3 weeks ago, around midday, with the sun high overhead. The giant trees were amazing. I've traveled a lot, seen rainforests in Queensland and mountain ranges in New Zealand, but nothing prepared me for just how huge and silent this forest felt. It was like stepping into a cathedral made of ancient wood and shadow. On my first day, everything was normal. I set up camp at a well-known campground near a visitor center. I remember chatting with a park ranger who seemed nice at first, but also looked tired, like he hadn't slept well in weeks. He mentioned in passing that a few hikers reported weird noises at night, but he chalked it up to the wind or animals. I thought nothing of it. He just said, "Be sure to keep your food locked up tight. You never know what'll wander into camp." So I shrugged it off and went on with my day. Things took a turn that night. I was lying in my tent, trying to sleep, when I heard a sudden snap of a branch right behind me. I froze. Raccoons? A deer? The forest was so quiet, except for heavy steps, almost like a person pacing outside. Then the steps stopped right at the edge of my tent. I held my breath. After a few minutes, the steps moved away, and it was dead silent again. I was too scared to move or unzip the tent. The next morning, I told the same ranger what I heard, and his face got kind of pale. He tried to laugh it off, but I could see he was uneasy. He said something like, "We've had some odd reports, but I'm sure it's nothing." Then he quickly changed the subject, pointing me to a trail that led deeper into the park, away from the usual tourist spots. I later found out people call that trail Deadwood Pass, though it's not the official name. Apparently, several hikers have gone missing there over the years, and rumors say something strange is out that way. Being curious, I decided to go explore. That second day was peaceful at first. I hiked along the marked trail, feeling the cool shade of the redwoods and the damp moss under my feet. After a couple of hours, I reached a place where the trail split into two paths. One was marked with a sign pointing to a scenic overlook, and the other had a chain across it saying, "Do not enter, trail closed." Guess which one I took? I stepped over the chain, feeling a tiny electric thrill that maybe I was off limits. I walked another 30 minutes or so and noticed how quiet it got. No birds, no rustling leaves. Then I smelled something foul, like rotten meat mixed with burned rubber. My eyes started to water, and I heard this low grunt off to my left. I couldn't see anything but massive tree trunks and shadows. I knew I should turn around, but I felt like something was drawing me in. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a rough campsite that looked abandoned. Someone had scrawled weird symbols on the trunk of a fallen redwood. A small circle of stones sat in the middle, with a pile of ash and something that looked like animal bones. I got the worst feeling standing there, like I was trespassing on a secret place where I did not belong. I heard movement behind me, quick steps on the leafy ground, and I darted behind a wide tree to hide. My heart pounded so hard I could taste the adrenaline. Peeking out, I saw a tall shape cross the clearing, but it moved so fast I couldn't make out details. Long arms, a hunched back, maybe black or dark brown fur. The shape vanished into the shadows like it never existed. That's when my nerves broke, and I sprinted back toward the main trail. When I got back to the visitor center, I was a mess, breathing hard and drenched in sweat. A different ranger was on duty, an older lady with a stern expression. She gave me a once-over and asked if I was okay. I told her about the abandoned campsite, and she sighed. She said something like, "Wish folks wouldn't go wandering where they're not supposed to." People keep reporting weird sightings, and then they end up scared or lost. She spoke in that careful tone that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Before I could press her for details, she went back into an office, closed the door, and I couldn't talk to her anymore. That same evening, I met a couple from Oregon around the camp area. They said they'd heard unearthly howling sounds the night before. The woman told me they'd seen glowing eyes in the trees about 7 feet off the ground. She was so rattled she wouldn't leave their RV after dark. Her husband whispered that a friend of his who used to work in the park had quit abruptly, claiming a dark presence lurked among the tallest trees. I could tell they were truly scared. They planned to leave first thing in the morning. On my third night, I tried to brush it all off, telling myself I was just letting my imagination run wild. But I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, the forest exploded with this chorus of snapping branches and guttural growls. It sounded like multiple creatures were fighting, or maybe hunting. My tent shook. I'd never felt fear like that in my life. Then, at around 2 a.m., it got eerily quiet. Out of nowhere, I heard a man's voice calling my name, but it was distorted, almost mechanical. I hadn't told many people my name there, so I have no idea how it knew. It circled my tent, stepping lightly. Then the voice said, "Help me," in that same twisted tone. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't bring myself to even unzip the tent to look. By morning, I'd had enough. I threw my gear into my car and drove straight to a small motel outside the park. The clerk there told me he used to hear all kinds of stories from travelers, tales of creatures, rituals in the woods, missing people. He warned me not to talk too much about it because there were folks who might not appreciate outsiders stirring up rumors. I'm not sure if that was a threat or a piece of advice, but it sent shivers down my spine. The next day, I decided I had to talk to someone who'd listen. I found a group of locals in a cafe a few miles from the park entrance. One older man said that he once worked search and rescue for the region. He told me about a 12-year-old boy who disappeared for 2 days and then wandered out of the forest with no memory of what happened. The boy had claw marks on his arm, but no one could figure out what kind of animal made them. He also said there have been rumors of government people in unmarked trucks roaming the back roads at night, shining spotlights into the woods. The official story is that they're doing routine wildlife surveys. He didn't sound convinced. Before I left town, I drove up a ridge overlooking the forest. That's when I saw smoke rising from deep in the trees, in the area where the closed trail might lead. My gut twisted. I didn't even want to imagine what was happening back there. Some sort of dark ceremony? A group of creatures gathering? I'll never know, and I think I'm better off that way. I left Northern California as soon as I could, but I can't sleep without dreaming of those enormous shadows and that horrible voice calling my name. Every time I close my eyes, I see that creature skulking through the giant redwoods. So, if you ever find yourself in Redwood National Park, tread carefully. There's something out there, ancient, warped, and far from welcoming. Locals, rangers, and fellow campers all seem to share a silent understanding, as though they're tiptoeing around a dark secret hidden within those towering trees. Moving on, we have the story of a Sacramento camper who ventured into the Eldorado foothills in search of peace, only to encounter what might be a demonic force lurking beneath the pines. I was just trying to get away from the city noise, you know? I've lived in Sacramento my whole life, and the idea of a simple camping trip up near Eldorado National Forest sounded perfect. But now I can't stop replaying every terrifying moment in my head. I need to warn someone, anyone, about this. I headed out on a Friday after work, aimed straight for a spot I found on a map near Placerville, where the trees thicken and the roads wind up into the foothills. I parked my car down a dirt lane, well away from the main road. The late afternoon light made everything look a little hazy, like golden dust floating in the air. The forest was mostly tall pines, firs, and oak trees scattered around, and the ground was covered in old needles and crunchy leaves that smelled damp and earthy. There was a small creek not too far off, and I could hear the soft trickle of water. It felt peaceful at first, almost comforting. I set up my tent in a small clearing, thinking it would be nice to have a bit of open sky to see the stars. As night crept in, I started a small fire with some dried kindling I'd gathered. The flames flickered, lighting up the nearest trees with a dancing glow, but everything beyond that was pitch black. The forest seemed calm. No cars, no people shouting, just an occasional breeze rustling the branches. Then, somewhere around 10 p.m., I felt this sudden drop in temperature like a cold spot in the middle of summer. I tried to ignore it, but a weird feeling settled in my gut. Something was off, like the woods were too quiet. I heard a branch snap in the distance, then nothing. Another snap, closer this time. I got this eerie sense that something was circling around. I told myself it was probably just a deer or maybe a raccoon. But then I heard a low moan, almost like wind through a hollow pipe, but deeper and full of something dark. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. It was like a hurt animal and a growl mixed into one. My mind raced to all those stories of weird creatures and cryptids people talk about, but I tried to stay calm. An hour later, my small fire started to die down, and the darkness just pressed in all around me. Every snap of a twig felt like a jolt to my nerves. I swear I heard breathing coming from somewhere behind my tent, heavy and strained, like someone or something was panting. When I shone my flashlight into the trees, there was nothing there, but I could feel eyes on me, watching. Eventually, I crawled into my tent, thinking maybe I'd feel safer zipped up inside. Big mistake. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of my tent fabric being pushed inward, like a hand, but it didn't feel like fingers. It was more like a rounded, solid pressure. My heart was hammering so loud, I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. Then came this horrible, wet grunt that made me think of a drowning pig, if that even makes sense. I couldn't breathe, let alone scream. Somehow, I managed to stay still, and eventually the pressure lifted. But then I heard scratching at the base of the tent, slow and deliberate. It sounded like claws dragging against the nylon. My mind was screaming at me to do something, run, fight, anything. But my body was frozen. After what felt like an eternity, the scratching stopped. I stayed curled up, drenched in sweat, waiting for dawn like my life depended on it. When the first morning light finally came, I unzipped the tent and nearly threw myself out onto the ground. My campsite was a mess, and there was very large footprints, and these marks in the dirt that looked like something had been dragged. The strangest prints had 4 deep scratches, almost like talons, spaced way wider than any animal paw I know of. The air smelled stale and metallic, like old blood. My stomach turned. I should have packed up right then, but part of me needed to know if I'd gone crazy. So I decided to walk around a bit, just to see if I could find more signs. About 20 yards from my camp, I found a tree with large slashes running down the trunk, each gash a good 2 inches deep. The bark around the cuts looked blackened, almost burnt. That's when I noticed a puddle of thick, dark liquid near the base of the tree. It reminded me of tar, but it had a coppery smell. Whatever it was, it felt wrong, like I'd stumbled into something dark and unnatural. As I stood there, I heard a voice in the distance, like a quiet whisper calling my name. It sounded human at first, but then it warped into a low hiss. I spun around but saw nothing, only more trees. The forest suddenly felt claustrophobic, like the branches were closing in on me. My pulse pounded in my ears so loud I could hardly think. I started to run back to my tent, weaving through the trees, almost tripping over roots. When I made it back, I found that my tent had been moved a few feet from where I'd set it up, even though it was still staked into the ground. The stakes were pulled out halfway, like something tried to lift the entire tent and drag it away. That's when I heard it again, a guttural moan, this time so close it felt like it was right behind me. I spun around, but only caught a glimpse of a tall, shadowy figure disappearing into the tree line. It looked hunched, and the eyes, or where the eyes should have been, glowed a faint, sickly yellow. The face was elongated, almost snout-like, but twisted in a way that didn't seem natural, like the bones were all wrong. I've never felt such raw fear. I grabbed my gear as fast as I could, stuffing everything into my backpack without folding it. I practically sprinted to my car, my mind spinning. Was it some kind of demonic entity? A A creature not yet discovered? Part of me wanted to rationalize it, but there was no way to explain away those footprints, the weird tar-like liquid, or that horrifying moan. I jumped in my car and sped away, nearly swerving off the dirt road. When I finally hit pavement, I noticed a rusted-out pickup parked on the shoulder, its driver nowhere to be seen. The windows were smashed, and there were these same strange claw marks scratched into the metal on the side. I thought about stopping to look for the driver, but a part of me knew better. I just kept going until I reached a main highway. By the time I got home, it was late afternoon, and my head was pounding. That night I had a nightmare. I was back at my campsite, surrounded by the trees, that same voice whispering my name. Then I felt hot breath on my neck, and I snapped awake, drenched in sweat. I haven't slept much since. Every time I close my eyes, I see that hunched shadow, too tall to be a person, too twisted to be an animal. I told a close friend about it, and they said maybe I stumbled on some old legend or unholy place. They'd heard rumors from hunters about weird happenings in those woods. Strange lights, animals turning up half-eaten, footprints vanishing before your eyes. Some folks claim the government knows something roams out there and keeps it under wraps. I don't know if that's true, but I can't ignore what I saw, and I sure can't explain it. I don't know if I'll ever go back to that area. Part of me feels I shouldn't talk about it anymore, as if speaking of it might call it back. But I have to let people know. There's a darkness in those woods, something dangerous, something beyond normal. I'm telling you this out in hopes that someone will believe me or at least be cautious if they plan to camp near Placerville or anywhere in Eldorado National Forest. This isn't a joke or a wild story I made up, it's real. So if you ever find yourself out there, trust your instincts. If you sense you're being watched, if you hear that strange moan or see those claw marks, don't hesitate. Leave immediately. And so, another strange encounter fades away. A trick of the mind or something far more unsettling. That's for you to decide. Thank you so much for watching my stories. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support is what keeps this channel going.